Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. This is a podcast about using your creativity to improve your life. I am a creative performance strategist, which just means that I help people to figure out how to use their creativity in their lives and business to get better results from either one. This episode is an interview with Peter Nicholls. He is somebody that has been doing this stuff for a very long time. He actually retired officially 20 years ago, but since then, he has figured out a lot of stuff about how to tune into our true natural potential, how to enjoy our lives. That's what he does now. He calls himself an enjoyment mentor, life enjoyment mentor. I found this podcast really interesting. I found the interview really interesting. I actually discovered Peter when I listened to his podcast. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And it made me realize that the stuff we talk about here on this podcast, about being real, about being creative, about tuning into the real stuff and the truth and blah, 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 all of that stuff is applicable to all of us, no matter how old we are. And that really just made me find Peter very interesting, because he is coming at this from the point of view of having a lot of life experience. He's a great guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy this interview and get some good stuff out of it. If you like this podcast, then subscribe if you haven't already. You can leave a voice note if you want to feature. Nobody's done that yet, which I kind of understand. But other than that, just keep it real, keep growing, keep flowing. All of the stuff that we encourage over here on Creative Status. Enjoy this interview, and thanks to Peter for coming on and sharing all his experience and insight with us. Here we go. Oh, hi there, Peter. Thank you for joining me today on Creative Status. You are a life enjoyment mentor, which sounds like a very fun job, a good thing to be doing with your time. Before I start asking you a million questions, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody, about the kind of work you do and who you are, all that kind of stuff?
Love to. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks for having me on. And g'day from Australia, I think is a good way to put it to start off. Now, look, thanks for that. The life enjoyment is certainly fun as a part of it. But life enjoyment is really about enjoying life, which is a lot deeper subject than simply going out with the mates and having a drink on a Saturday night, which is fun. And I like that too. Well, I haven't done a lot of that lately, I'll be honest. I do have a drink with a mate on a Friday night, I will say. But, that's fun, and we should all have a bit of that. But it's the question of where enjoyment fits into life that I focus on. And I tend to focus most of my work on people who are going through a transition of some sort. A lot of my work up till COVID was transition to what I call life after work. I don't use the word retirement, because I've passed that age of life, and I've never retired, and so I don't use that. But I won't diverge on that too much right now. But it's that's really this transition where people are looking to see, what do I want to do with the next phase of my life? Am I looking for a new life adventure? What do I need to do to plan for it? I bring in the question of what you enjoy doing, and I focus on that. Now, there's a background to that, Ollie, which is reason why I do it. For 30 years, I was what we call a recreation planner. I worked in the area of sport and recreation, particularly in the area of recreation and leisure. And I think in England, the word leisure tends to get used more than recreation. I actually went to a major leisure conference in Harrogate in Yorkshire back in the 90s. So I got to know a bit about the English leisure scene in my time in recreation planning. But in that, I found, actually, it's interesting because I came up through an era where the work ethic said, we shall all do what we're told to do. And I had a job like that for 15 years. But then I became a recreation planner, and I found myself being treated like that's not a real job. And funding for recreation was very difficult to get, because it wasn't seen as something that you should spend public money on. People going out and having fun is not really a government issue. You can do that, look after yourself. So I had to battle that for a long time. But So that there was that battle when I was a recreation planner till the 2002, and then I had to when I decided I got some work uh, with based on a book I'd written at the time called "Enjoy Being You," which was
Mm,
actually a reflective book on my history as a recreation planner, what I'd learned about people and what I'd learned about the benefits of enjoyment in that period. And I set myself up as not necessarily a life enjoyment mentor initially, more a work leisure consultant. And then I hit brick walls again because again, business was saying we're not interested in leisure, we're interested in stress management, work life balance, all these. And I had to change all my terminology to suit
mm,
the workplace situation, but it was still a
mm.
battle. But all of that leads me up to where I am now, and that sort of explains quite a bit. But I've now had, well, getting on nearly 50 years of experience on observing people when they're really enjoying their life and what they get out of it. And that's really
Wow.
become the substance of what I do now.
Wow. So obviously there's a lot going on there, but I think
Mhm.
the amazing thing that you said is what you said right at the start of your reply, which is that this idea of enjoyment is actually a lot deeper than people just having fun and kind of doing trivial things to pass the time. Enjoyment is something that society doesn't necessarily understand. If I understand your work properly, like a lot of the
Correct.
time, like you said, there's councils and governments, etc. They might not fund things that help people enjoy life because they
Hmm.
still are in this mindset, this almost industrial age mindset, that human beings are just supposed to work for however many years, retire, drop dead, and then that's it. We're not really supposed to focus on enjoying life. We're supposed to just contribute to society in this kind of sacrificial way almost. So, my question for you now is some of the deeper things you've alluded to about enjoyment. What would
Hmm.
you say they are? Like, why is enjoyment such an important thing anyway?
Uh, the very short answer, is if we didn't have enjoyment in our lives, we would
Mm.
be dead. Honestly, one of my slogans is, "What does enjoyment do for you? It gets rid of the pain of not enjoying life," which is a
Mm.
fairly black and white way of looking at it. Because I've had to find these rather blunt ways of breaking through the shell of
Mm.
what enjoyment means. You're quite right, Ollie. It's people sort of look at you a bit. I mean, the very title, "Life Enjoyment Mentor." You imagine, am I a clown? Am I a laughter doctor? Or what do I do? But when I start to say, look, it's really enjoyment is actually a very serious matter. Uh,
Mm.
People say, how can you say that? Look, let's go right down to the basics of what happens when you enjoying yourself. Now, whatever that might be. Let's say you play cricket. I mean, that's a good one, which we both like talking about. Perhaps you don't like talking about at the moment, but anyway, uh, but it's not anyway. But so let's just say you like a game of cricket. In my case, it was hockey. While you're enjoying yourself, there are five things happening. The first one is the mind is working with purpose. You're
Mm.
thinking about things that you want to do. There's challenge. It's an active thinking, whether you're actually physically active or not. The brain is actively working through something or other,
Mm. Mm.
questioning, challenging. These sorts of things are happening. The
Mm.
second one is there's an energy driving the process. The word which helps greatly is energizing. And I said to somebody once, "What do you do for energy?" And they replied, "I go to the gym 3 times a week." And I said, "That's a good answer. Now, tell me, what do you do to energize?" Immediately, their answer was, "I love tap dancing." There were two different answers to what energy and energizing meant, but nobody had to think twice about what did I mean. You know
Mm.
what it means when you feel energized.
Mm.
You are moving forward in your brain. Your mind is actively doing something. It's not just lying back half asleep. You're actually
Mm.
thinking. Which gets onto the third one. The third one says your self esteem is rising. While you're enjoying yourself, you're feeling good about yourself. Your
Mm.
self confidence, your self belief are high. and you're really feeling like you're doing something you love doing. And the
Mm.
fourth one is you're actually learning something usually when some it might not be a huge thing, it might be a little thing. Let's take the cricket example, which is an easy one. And it
Mm.
doesn't have to be physical activity, by the way. We'll talk about that. I'll throw in a line, I sing in two choirs. To me, that's a huge energizer. But we'll go down that track in a moment. But let's
Okay.
let's keep the cricket one, which people would understand. So the fourth one is when you play cricket or a sport of any sort, you're always trying to do a bit better. You're looking out to learn
Mm.
more new things that will make it the quality of what you're doing a little bit better. If you're say going for a walk in the countryside, you want to make sure that you see things that are making it worthwhile. What's around the next corner? I'm wondering, oh look, there's a beautiful flower, whatever it might be. The
Mm.
fifth one is the one I think is really, really relevant. It's the best possible virus we could have. And that's the virus of spreading feeling good. Because while you're
Mm.
really enjoying yourself, everyone else around you is catching the bug.
Mm.
They sense
Mm.
your enjoyment and they feel better too. So
Mm.
these are things that are happening. Can I go on a little bit further because it goes on from there? It doesn't stop there. It
Yeah,
actually
please
has
do.
it has a ripple effect. But was
Mm.
there, if you've been enjoying your cricket match, then you enjoy and win, lose or draw doesn't matter. You go
Mm.
home saying that was a bloody good day out. It was a tough day, but I was with my mates. We tried hard. We had a win perhaps or we didn't.
Mm.
But you go on and there's a good feeling which actually happens. It makes you think about everything else for the rest of the day, and perhaps
Mm.
even for the rest of the week. You see things a little bit differently. I've got a life example of that, which actually brings this point home quite dramatically over a period of some months.
Mm.
If we've got a bit of time, I might just tell you because it really does emphasise what enjoyment is about in terms of life, not just simply having a good time. I was going through some bad times. Geez, it must be about 20 years ago now. So it's a long way back. I was going through 6 months of really rough times for all sorts of personal reasons that aren't important for this. But the
Mm.
big effect that 6 months had on me was my self-esteem dropped to almost zero. I was
Oh.
really struggling,
Mm.
and this came out was I had to leave or I was left a job, and they said, "Well, we'll put you through a Meyer-Briggs assessment, which might help you." And that
Mm.
was the Meyer-Briggs assessment. Said you are really top marks at everything except your self-esteem is about Z. And I
Oh.
said, yes, it was. Uh, at the time, I go to church regularly, and somebody came up and said, Peter, you've got a good tenor voice. We need a tenor in the choir. We'd love you to come and join the choir.
Mm.
Well, when you're down, you say, look, I love singing, but the last thing I feel like at the moment is singing. Sorry, no,
Mm.
not
Mm.
interested. And I got badgered to keep for a while, and eventually I kept saying no. Eventually, I suppose a couple of hours on a Thursday night wouldn't do me any harm. And so what happened then was I said, okay, I'll come along. Well,
Mm.
I got to the choir practice the first night, and the director said, Peter, we are really glad you are here. Something I hadn't heard for quite a while. That was the first thing. And then the rest of the choir, of about 20 odd people, burst into applause. That I hadn't heard. Now, honestly, straight away, I'm thinking, this is new. And I quite enjoyed the evening. I can't say I was, suddenly changed, but it was nice to do. And I remember next morning thinking, that wasn't bad, I'll go back next week. And then I sort of decided that Sunday wasn't bad, Monday wasn't bad. It was a little bit better too. And then I kept going back, and I was starting to fit in, and I was being told that I fitted in nicely. I was singing well and all that. And I was starting to turn around. I was starting to see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and Friday differently because my attitude was changing by getting this sort of encouragement and doing something I really loved for the hell of it. There was no pressure on me to do it. And so and I usually finish that story by saying the person giving you this talk tonight owes a lot to that decision to join the choir. and the person who nagged me into doing it too. Um, Now, I mean, the point of all that is that this is a life-changing thing. If you're down and things and you're struggling, you're looking for ways that you actually bring the real self out. I loved
Wow.
singing. I naturally have always. My mother was a singer, and I naturally loved singing. It was a question of just bringing it out in the right circumstances, and that started to affect everything else. It's a really important part of life.
Mm. It's probably the most important part of life because only if you actively go out and bring the energy to your life in those kind of scenarios or situations can you allow the real self to emerge. So those five things that you said build up or make up enjoyment. So your mind working with purpose, being energized, having your self esteem be lifted, that you're
Mhm.
learning, that you're spreading good feelings, because the energy that you get from enjoyment is infectious and you can pass it on to other people. All of those things really just allow you to embody and become the natural, real version of yourself. And actually, that story that you shared about the choir is a really good example of that because actually it sounds like what happened was something happened in your life that caused you to hit rock bottom basically, and when you are or when we are human beings in that place that we call rock bottom, usually what happens is we just end up going into our heads and living as a mental idea of ourselves or a mental construct where we feel that we're separate from the rest of life, that we're no good because we're judging ourselves and all these different things. And actually, that's not a real version of who we are. It's just a response or a reaction to whatever we've been through based on our emotional stuff. And actually, by putting ourselves in situations like the choir for you, where we can enjoy ourselves, it reactivates our relationship with the real version of who we are and the real version of life. The real version of life being that we're constantly growing, we're constantly moving, that we are connected to other people and all those kind of things. And so when you put it like that, enjoyment really is a super important part of being a human being or having a human experience.
And you know that we have, I mean, not only people like me have been, trying to push this point. It's the work ethic system has sort of
Mm,
damped it down. Although
mm,
as a young teenager, you may have all sorts of dreams of becoming a rock star, an
mm,
actor, a singer, anything, and so often the parents will go, "Oh, I don't know whether you'll make any money doing that." You need to get a real job, that makes money so you can buy a house and do all the things that you want to do.
mm,
So it gets all stuffed down, in the very early years. And in fact, one of the things I'd like to raise a little later, and perhaps it's not this bit soon, is about the whole education system. About the
mm.
education system is designed to get you a real job,
Yeah.
and there's a whole issue in that, but we can come to that a little later, perhaps. But
Yeah, or we could hop on it now, to be honest, because actually, what you're saying is 100% true. So the education system actually it wants people to be in a similar mindset to maybe a bit more extreme, but to a similar mindset in terms of the structure to where people often find themselves when they're at rock bottom. That
mm,
mindset being that they're not growing, that they're just static, that things don't change, that their self worth or self esteem is dependent on external things like the house that you mentioned and the car and all these different things. And so people actually get conditioned uh, as they come through the education system to chase something that is actually bad for them in the long term in terms of their mental well-being and all that kind of stuff.
there's a big word in there. We've been taught to live on on expectation, or what we think other people's expectations of us are,
Mm,
rather than being being the true self. My theme is basically enjoy being your true self, because
mm,
everything keeps coming back to that in all these points that we're raising. It keeps coming back to, look,
mm,
so long as you're trying to fit into the rest of the world because you think that's the way it should be, and you're the
mm,
one who's out of step, then it's a real struggle. And as I say, I know full well that from that 6 months that I went through, in the story I was mentioning earlier.
mm,
It is a sense of There's a lovely term, instead of, it expresses the point. Instead of self-esteem, people go through what I call other esteem, living through the esteem that other people think you should have. This is what
Mm,
other people think of me, therefore that's what I am. And
yeah.
if people think you're silly, you're dumb, or you're whatever, then you start to believe it because people keep saying it. Therefore, it must be true. And
Mm,
that's what I call other esteem, living off what you think other people think about you. Very
mm.
very dangerous. Mm.
So would you say that this pursuit of enjoyment is a way of kind of flipping the script on that? So it's not about the other esteem; it's about self-esteem. It's returning you to your natural way of being, but also your natural way of seeing and interacting with other people.
Yeah, you're triggering another line of thought here.
Mm,
Enjoyment is a
mm,
very personal thing. It's the
mm,
absolute last bastion of free choice that you have. Nobody
mm,
can tell you or me what we should enjoy. We are
mm,
only, you can even be in a group. You might go out with a mob of people that one Saturday night and everyone says, "Isn't this fun?" And you
mm,
sort of go along with it, but you're thinking to yourself, "I'm not having one bit of fun at all. I wish I was somewhere else." But
mm,
because that's your free choice to decide whether you think you're enjoying yourself or not. And the reason why, and what triggers off that enjoyment is each one of us is born with our own unique mix of gifts and talents and
mm,
abilities and passions that we find as kids and as teenagers. That's what gives us life, and we wish we were allowed to keep doing it. But
mm,
society says, you can do that 2 days a week. The other five, you go to work and earn money. So we get this 5 day work and 2 day live. But it's this idea that as a unique individual, you realise this talk that we're doing,
mm,
everybody who listens into it has their own will have their own interpretation of what we're saying, because
mm,
everybody thinks for themselves and should be encouraged to do so, because
mm,
that's what it's all about. We were born differently to everyone else,
mm,
to simply cram us all into like the expression I used recently was we're to be all in grey suits being crowded into a train or the car to get to work on a Monday morning, and grey suits and white shirts and ties and a bag in your hand and whatever, perhaps even an
mm.
umbrella or something. This sort of image of marching along in an army. Don't stick your head up because people will think you're a bit weird. That sort of thing. Mind you, I'm really interested in chatting with you about this because you're a much younger person than me. Because this is breaking down, but it's being broken down by a bit of a fight against the system. The
Mm,
system
mm,
doesn't necessarily accept, a lot of things that we generally, as individuals, we accept. The system
mm,
still struggles with a lot of things, and so the battle continues. But I guess, well, but yeah, it really is such a key part of who we are, and freely expressing who we are,
mm,
is such a crucial part of our lives that COVID is actually opening up. COVID, it was the stop we had to have, because
mm,
the world was going nuts with stress and pressure and great resignations and all sorts of stories, that because people had had enough. And
mm,
suddenly overnight, we're all stuck back in our house thinking, what are we going to do now? Not just what's happening to the world, but what's happening to me? Where am
mm,
I going to go in all this when I come out? And I
mm,
think now, nearly 3 years later, we're still just coming to terms with this is all very different. And now's the time to really unleash this stuff that you and I are talking about tonight,
mm.
or today, your
But
time.
yeah, well, you've mentioned the age difference between us, but I think that's one of the things that makes this so interesting because even though
Mm,
there's a couple of generations difference between us, the reality of life is just the same for everybody. The stuff that we're talking about, which is ultimately that people need a sense of purpose and a growth mindset, and that they can use their creativity or enjoyment to bring their real selves to the surface, is actually part of a timeless human conversation, which is ultimately about finding the balance between our real lives as individuals meets the system itself, I suppose. Like, how
Mhm.
do we fit into a system or a world that is asking us to be unreal when all any of us really want is to be real? And I think, even though you're older than me and I'm younger than you, the things that we're saying are applicable no matter what age you are in life, because human beings are always human and they're always going to have a need to keep growing and to keep moving forward and to keep pushing through their current ideas about themselves and all that kind of thing. What I know you talked about how we're all different and we all have our unique gifts and our weaknesses and strengths and all these kind of things. What do we all have in common, would you say, at the most basic structural level of bringing our real self to the surface, especially in the face of an unreal system, if you want to call it that?
I think we all want to be valued. We
Mm,
all want to feel that other people respect what we're good at,
mm,
to feel like uh, that that we have a purpose in life of some sort,
mm,
to feel like we've got some direction to go in, that we're not just simply wandering around aimlessly from one paycheck to another or
mm,
whatever it might be.
mm,
I think we're all looking to. Yeah, I think valued covers a huge range. It's not what our values are. That's another question.
mm,
But feeling that you are valued and have a sense of dignity and respect from other
mm,
people who
mm,
say, not because you've done anything wonderful, but simply
mm.
because you're you. They say, look,
Yes.
you're good at listening, you're good at singing, you're good at numbers, you're good at whatever it happens to be. You're good with
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
hands, you're good with your mind. We need you. We value that because you've got something that other people can make use of. And
Wow.
then, but of course, and interchange with that is this: we all want this sense of being given a chance to give it a go too, to be able to feel like not only have I got this to offer, but people want to come. There's a two-way flow
Yeah.
about you having a skill and them saying, we need people with your skill. What can we work out together to achieve something that we both want? I
Wow.
think there's something, this sense of connection between
Mm, mm,
people who are saying we are all got something we value and we are respected for our difference, not for our
mm,
uniformity and conformity.
mm. I love everything you just said. Actually, the reason this podcast is called Creative Status is kind of for very similar reasons to the ones you just shared. And ultimately, the idea of creative status to me just means that we find something real within ourselves and we use our creativity to kind of get that to the highest possible level of value to ourselves. And then we find a way to make it valuable in the world. And when we do that and we share the fruits of our creativity in the right way, in a real way, then we're more valuable to ourselves because we've gone through this process of kind of allowing the creativity to take us where we need to go. But also, we've got something that we can share with the world that other people will value and that they'll respect us for, will respect ourselves for, and that we're not just passively going through the motions of doing what society has told us to do. Creativity always comes with some rebellion, I think, against an unreal world because the world doesn't want us to be our real selves. And creativity always means that you are going to bring your real self to the surface. And I think this brings us back to something that you talk about quite a lot, which is the idea of purpose. Because if you can design a purpose for yourself that allows you to become more real, more authentic as you move towards the realization of that purpose, then you'll tick off a lot of those boxes that I've just said and that you just shared as well, which is that
Mm.
you'll have something real to share with the world, basically. So my question for you now is, how do we start to design that kind of a purpose for ourselves? So a purpose that allows the real version of who we are to come to the surface, but also to ensure that we actually have something of value to share with other people, that's going to make a difference to their lives, or that's going to at least allow them to understand themselves more so they can become more real as well.
Yeah. I'm just thinking through that one. I think perhaps the first place I'll start is what happened with me in the
Mm,
stage, and I'm going back, quite a few years now, where I actually first decided I wanted to become a recreation planner.
mm,
I was working the standard desk sort of work in a large building, with lots of other people.
mm,
For and I turned about 30, and I was looking out the office window one day, saying to myself, 30, because I was 30, I thought 35 more years of this, and then a
mm.
gold watch, and that's it. And I thought, is that really why I'm here? And
Mm,
anyway, now the point of that was for the next 4 years, I was searching. I
mm,
was asking myself, I wonder if I'd be any good at, I wonder if I'd be
mm,
any good at, I wonder if I'd be any good at. And I was struggling to find something that would give me a sense of, and I wasn't thinking of the word purpose at the time. I just wanted
mm.
to do something I liked.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
was really in the context of what we're discussing, I was really looking for some reason to be here, a
Mm,
purpose that was doing. Now, to me, I
mm,
was in those 2 days where we live in the five, the 7 days. I was very involved in sports administration in the field hockey area,
mm,
both in the club and eventually up to an association level. And I was both as a player and administrator. The government of the day brought in the whole recreation profession thing, saying leisure was possibly the issue of the next generation,
mm,
and I suddenly said, here's a chance to actually express what I do on the weekends as a job.
mm,
And they opened up this recreation planning graduate diploma course. I passed with A plus distinction, flying colours. I'd found my purpose.
mm,
I, but I think the key to me was this sense of searching, because I don't think if you're just sitting there going
mm,
through the
mm,
motions,
mm.
these things don't happen. You've got to actually get the brain searching for something and saying,
Yeah.
looking to say, is there a
Mm,
door open that might want me? And eventually, I
mm,
actually say, I think 3 times in my life, I haven't found purpose. Purpose has found me.
mm.
I think
How?
that's what happens.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'll let you
Uh,
soak that one up.
I think that's so important. Like a lot of the time, if we just assume that we can choose our purpose and that we already know everything, then we're actually just going to put ourselves in a situation that's not going to get us where we need to be, because by us just choosing things and acting like we've already got all the answers, we're just putting the same kind of thinking into the selection of our purpose that led to wherever we are already, where we don't feel a sense of purpose. And so,
Yep.
actually, you have to be open to exploring and letting the purpose find you in the way that you've said, because only if you do that is the purpose going to be the product of something that's more real than the current version of you, or the seeking, searching version of you. How do you, or how do we maximize the odds if someone, for example, that's listening to this is trying to find their purpose? How can they maximize the odds of the purpose finding them instead of them just trying to come up with it themselves?
I think this idea, some of the words, curiosity is always
Mm,
a big thing. To stay curious.
mm,
Um, I think this is a lovely word. I mean, there's words, and I know you use these sorts of words: creativity, innovation, curiosity, imagination.
mm.
These are natural elements
Wow.
which the system stuffs down.
Mm,
Everybody's got creative abilities. You may not make any. It may not be life changing or world changing, but you create something. You create a feeling amongst people when you.
mm,
I got one of my simple one-liners is: if you want to feel better, do something to make someone else feel better. Now,
mm.
that's not something that says, look, you do something that creates something in that other person's mind that they go away and say, gee, I feel much better now. Thank you very much. You've created. Creativity can be as simple as that. It's not a
mm,
question of saying, well, can I make the first Hydra
mm,
aeroplane, that's ever flown, or something like that. Look, I
mm,
think this question of wanting to allow the real you to come out,
mm,
of simply, first of all, deciding that you've got something that you want to offer.
mm,
If you think, no, look, there's nothing, and I think this happened. Well, look, there's nothing I've got that's any good. I don't. There's
mm.
a way of actually. I've just thought of an answer that I think might be really much clearer for the person. Go back to experiences you have enjoyed in your past.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everybody's had some. A lot of my workshop stuff is actually linking enjoyment and memory,
Right.
because the two are like, horse and carriage. If you
Mm,
enjoyed something, you never forget. And it can
mm,
go back to when you were a kid playing with dolls or rockets or whatever, um,
mm,
going through to your adolescent years, all these things. What do you enjoy? One of my best techniques, when I do, in fact, I offer a 1 hour sort of cheapie where I take people back to when they're adolescent years. What did you do when you were 15 or thereabouts?
mm, mm,
And
mm.
why did you do it? What did it do for you? How does that relate to who you are today?
Yeah.
And you
Wow.
honestly, you'd be amazed on that one little exercise how many aha moments come out.
Mm,
Wow, I've never thought of. You're right. I actually. Oh yes, lots of things bubble up, and
mm,
memory bubbles up good things. Well, it
mm,
might bubble up bad things too. I realise this, but it's the good things that generate the energy that
yeah.
gets you thinking. And in fact,
Mm,
every experience you enjoy today, you'll remember for the rest of your life, as well as
wow.
that. The memory and enjoyment go together. So
Mm,
there's a lovely expression: look back to look forward. So
mm,
if you look
mm,
back to the days when you were really enjoying things without any pressure,
mm,
and it might only have been at the weekend, whatever it was you loved doing at the weekend. Who were you then when you were enjoying it? What was happening? Why were you enjoying it? What sort of skills did you love using at that time, etc.?
mm,
And once you get this, the aha moments start to take over, and it
mm,
starts to drive the brain, and the brain starts to
yeah.
think, "Yep, that's right. You're good at this. You're good at that. Whoa, enough." And next thing you know, the ripple effect starts to take off.
Mm. Wow. That's a really powerful exercise if you think about it in terms of what we were saying about conditioning and the education system and the world. So a lot of people, if in fact most people, they go through a process of as they're in their adolescence or they're growing up, they become ashamed of the real version of who they are. They become ashamed so that they can fit into the social narrative ultimately and be a good employee of
Hmm.
a lot of the things that they enjoy, of their true values, of their true intentions. And they start to tell themselves a story that they're somebody other than what they are. And that story, the false story that they're telling themselves, ends up creating a life for them that is out of alignment with the real self. And so, actually,
Hmm.
if you can look back to look forward in the way that you're talking about, you can remember who you were before the conditioning took a hold of you and you set out on a false path, and you can start to course correct and put yourself back on the natural path for you, or the real path in the language we keep using. Does that mean then that there is a way for us to figure out what we enjoy, to re-experience enjoyment, which allows us to re-experience our real self, and then translate that into some kind of a purpose or creative endeavor that is going to allow us to kind of live the life that we really want to live? Is it that simple? Like, can we break it down like that?
To some extent, it is, because there are two well-known statements. One is throw it out to the universe and and the universe will come up with an answer. That's one
Mm,
way some people think,
mm,
and the other one is more a question: when the student is ready, the
yeah,
teacher
yeah,
appears. I mean,
yeah.
those
I
are
love.
statements which are very well known, but
Mm,
they are facts. When you put them in this context, you need to think of those things in context. If you are struggling with life, etc., put
mm,
it out there but be aware you are putting it out there. There's this awareness. This
mm,
self-awareness is what it's all about. Be aware of
mm,
who you are, and that's and that you want to actually make something of yourself. Not you
mm,
don't you've tried fitting in and it didn't work.
mm,
And
mm,
there's some mental health issues in here which I touch on a bit.
mm,
I'm not a mental health expert, but all this clearly does have an effect on mental
mm,
health.
mm,
But
mm,
I think if you can get to yourself to a point where you say this, depending on what
wow.
the status quo doesn't work.
Yeah.
Therefore, I need to say I've got to search in a different area. And as
Mm,
soon as you start to search in a different area, you're
mm,
starting to see the world differently.
mm,
If you can
mm,
start to feel, look, a good example, if you and I were face to face across the desk
mm,
and we were both sitting talking to each other, and then suddenly I stood up and looked down at you,
mm,
I've changed the situation straight away simply because I stood up and you're still sitting there.
mm,
Suddenly I'm towering over you and I'm looking as though I'm dominating you, no matter how friendly we are. There's
mm,
When you actually put yourself in a situation where you're a bit different to where you are now,
mm.
you start to see the world a bit differently.
Yeah,
I'll give you a good
100%.
example of that. A high level bloke. High level bloke. Back in about 2008, we all went through the global meltdown of finances and people losing money left, right, and centre. People
Mm,
losing their jobs. I had a client who was a top business person in Sydney, and
mm,
he was struggling, and he was telling me that those five things I was talking about. He said, "Look, Pete, you're dead right. I've got the whole lot in reverse. My energy levels are down. My mind's not working very well, and all sorts of things." He said, and the fifth one, he says, I can tell I'm actually putting my staff down. My staff are feeling it because I'm down. I
mm,
said to
mm,
him, and I'm shortening the whole thing. I said to him, "What did you always used to like doing?" And he
mm.
said, "Oh," and he came up and he said, "I used to like taking over the kitchen at home and cooking up a storm for the family."
Wow.
Really, I'd get it, and he's a real, he was a good cook. I said, "How long since you last did that?" He said, "Oh, it's a while now. I've been so busy." I said,
Mm,
"Why don't you just give it a go and see how you feel?"
mm,
I got in touch with, well, he got in touch with me, I don't know, weeks or it might even been months later, said life changed. He said, I did go home. I did start cooking up a storm. I felt really good and I started to see the work situation differently. It didn't solve the work problems, but I got a better feel and a better
mm,
look about what was happening at work and
mm,
things started to turn around, and
mm,
he actually done very well. Look, it's this getting out there and just sort of probing and
mm,
seeing things a bit differently and see what happens.
mm. I mean,
And then the
really,
world
it's
takes over.
yeah, but it's so simple, really. Like what you're saying is do things that you enjoy. And it's kind of crazy that so many people out there in the world do not allow themselves or do not give themselves permission to just do things that they enjoy. But the consequence of that is that they forget who they are. They don't know, that they can bring joy to other people and that they can improve their relationship with themselves. And that when you do have a good relationship with yourself, well, everything else in your life is more enjoyable as well, because basically your life is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. Um, do
Can
you
I just add
think,
two? Can I just
yeah,
add 2 points to that, Ollie? One of which is enjoyment is total control. You are in control when you're enjoying something. And that's
mm,
something that a lot of people struggle with because life is being
mm,
controlled.
mm,
They're being controlled by life. When you're doing
mm,
something you love, you are totally in control
mm,
of what you're doing. And once you get the idea that you can be in control of what you're enjoying, hey, I
mm,
could be in control of other things that I enjoy
yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
the other one, which is similarly related, is the power of enjoyment,
mm,
the self-empowerment of
mm,
enjoyment. When
mm,
you start thinking of enjoyment as a power, a source of power,
mm.
then you start to see the whole point of that. We
Wow.
both want to, we all want to have a control, and we all want to have some sense of empowerment.
Mm.
And you get all that when you do something that you enjoy.
Yeah,
Simple as
and
that.
and this goes back to your earlier point that enjoyment is a very serious thing, and actually, it's serious because it is about reclaiming our power. Our power ultimately is about our capacity to make choices about our life and whether or not our lives are real or unreal, i.e., that they're a reflection of our natural skills and abilities and our true values and intentions and all that stuff, versus that stuff being quashed and controlled by the world, which just wants us to be a cog in the economic machine, basically, if we don't listen to ourselves. Do you
Beautiful.
do you
You've said that
think?
beautifully.
Thank you, sir. Do you think that the something that you've said previously is that by living in this way that you're talking about, so putting a priority on enjoyment and your real self and growing and continuing to evolve and all these things, how does that relate to your ability to kind of be energetic and function in older age, if I can phrase it like that?
Mm.
Sorry if that's rude. It just
No, that's
seems that,
no.
yeah.
Mm. I'm glad you asked it, because that's pretty much my bread and butter stuff these days. It's in helping people move through to life after work. Look,
Mm,
I could actually spend the whole rest of the session just talking about this, but some key points. Key points are this: that we have in our working life we have a growth mindset.
mm,
It's not much choice. You're constantly finding I've got to grow. I've got to keep doing things that will make me a better person in the job, etc.
mm,
When
mm,
you leave work, you don't necessarily have to have a growth mindset. But
mm,
in fact, if you stop that growth mindset, then you start to slip back.
mm,
The whole process of life now is being the person you are from birth to death. We
mm,
have had to face this, what I call the bell curve life cycle, which
mm,
says
mm.
you get to 50, 55, and you're over the hill on the downhill slide. You're
Yeah.
past your use by date, all these sort of expressions. You're old. All this starts to happen from that top of that bell curve onwards. Now,
Mm,
the bell curve actually is a perception. It doesn't exist. It's not
mm,
there. We've just
mm,
been told to believe there is a bell curve there.
mm,
What
mm,
actually happens is there's two halves of life almost, and the first half is sort of establishing yourself, getting yourself established in the world. Perhaps looking after getting a mortgage or whatever the getting a family and bringing the kids up and through school, getting
mm,
established. But the other thing is that once you get to about midlife, and you don't have a midlife crisis, you have a midlife awakening.
mm,
You actually
mm,
start to realize, look, I now have more than just a lot of experience. I now understand myself a lot better. I
mm,
understand human behavior a lot better. I
mm,
have a depth of a perspective of insight. Google will give you all the information you need. What the world needs is is insight. What do I do
mm,
with this information? What's the best use of all this information that's going to
mm.
make a difference to me and to the world? That
Yeah.
sort of stuff. So actually, instead of that bell curve, if we were sitting together, I would say the line continues to go up so long as you stay healthy. It
Mm,
continues to go rise.
mm,
Except for one thing, that's not enough in itself. What
mm,
happens is by the time you get to that mid-year, 45 to 55 sort of growth, that curve starts to go up exponentially. And
mm.
in fact, the best
Wow.
analogy I can get, I have trouble diagrammatically picturing that till I think of something like the Big Bang Theory. The Big
Mm,
Bang Theory of the universe says things explode and there's more explosions, and the explosions get wider and wider. All these different things, you grow in a multi-dimensional way. And
mm.
so actually the second half of life, I have a
Wow.
talk which says that's the richest half of life.
Mm,
And listen, for you, Ollie, and you personally, at the age you're at now, and I'm not going to ask you what your age is, we don't do that. But what I do want to say is you need never feel old.
mm,
You can get
mm,
rid of the term, and your generation can get rid of the term old, because again, it's a perception of other people, and usually a negative perception. It's one
mm,
that says, look, a sports person is too old at 30, 35.
mm,
The parents in Australia, we often call the olds. Um, Anybody 15 years older than you is old. Uh, you
mm,
know, when we get to the year of finishing up work, you're too old. Old is a perception that doesn't exist. A bell curve is a perception that the work ethic in the Industrial Revolution told us to believe. Then the
mm,
days when you said, look, you get to 60, you're no good for work, you'll be dead
mm.
in 10 years, so, give up. And, that sort of thinking, we still live it to it today.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it really gets my goat. That's go
yeah. But
wrong.
you're right that to let it annoy you in a way, because it's basically just a cultural thing that we've picked up because of the
Yep.
economic system, basically
Yep.
saying that once you reach a certain age where you're retired, you're not offering your time for money to the economy, then you're over the heap and you're just you're going to die one day and that's it. Thanks for your
Mm.
service. See you later. It all comes down to, I think, what you said about the information versus insight thing when it comes to getting old. Sorry. So I think old is just a mindset, right? But the mindset comes about because of your attachment to all of the information that you've collected over the course of your life. And because you've become attached to that information and you don't have a growth mindset, because you're not letting new insight in, because you're not valuing learning over just being right or whatever it is, well, you get old because you're attached to interpretations and perceptions that are out of date, basically, because reality is continue to evolve and change, but your software, so to speak, has not. Do you think that there is something there about living to constantly chase new insight, living to constantly grow in the way that you've actually kind of said anyway, and living to constantly evolve and change? And getting old basically just means that you've taken yourself out of that process. And also,
Well,
sorry, I know I've made this a very
look
long-winded
on.
question.
No, that's
Um,
right.
when we spoke before, there was an analogy that you used about a tree. I can't remember exactly how you phrased it.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, can you remember
I
what
was
that
about
was?
to do it, actually. Yep,
I
go
read
on.
your mind. So yeah, what was that analogy? Because I can't remember what you said.
Right. Yes, and because I did a lot of my recreation planning was a lot to do in the parks area, and
Mm,
recreational use of parks. I got to know a lot about nature, and
mm,
yes, the tree. A tree doesn't actually. You never talk about a tree becoming old. It ages. A tree
mm,
ages,
mm,
and it doesn't. And it continues to age, and it continues to grow, and there is no predetermined age where it stops growing. It
mm,
keeps on growing so long as and actually, if you actually study a tree closely, you think it's just standing there doing nothing. The amount of energy and work that's going on between the root system and what the root system is doing, providing energy to that tree, the
mm,
bigger and older that tree, the more that tree ages, the more that's going on. But the point about it is that it doesn't old, it doesn't get old, it ages and it becomes eventually known as a significant tree.
mm,
So
mm.
we become significant as we age rather
Wow.
than we get old and drop off the perch.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing there as well, when I think about it, is there's a distinction, kind of metaphysically or whatever word we want to use, between aging and being old. And the difference is that if you're aging, you're constantly involved in the process of living. It's a process, is the point I'm making. But if you're old, well, you've reached a state of being, which is an event or a finalized, static way of being. And so, actually, that is the mental shift that we're talking about. You either see yourself as fixed or you see yourself as growing and evolving and moving. And only one of those two options is real, as far as I see it, because reality is constantly moving, it's constantly evolving. And if you want to stay young mentally, then you have to be attuned to that so that you're not um, holding yourself back with ideas and outdated information in the way that we said.
If you think you're old or you think you're not old, you're
Mm,
right.
yeah,
If you think
yeah.
you're old or you think you're not old, you're right. So
Mm,
that you can decide for yourself. The other one, of course, is we start aging from the day we're born.
mm,
Aging is a process that in fact, some of the fastest growth is the first 5 years. You
mm,
imagine a gurgling baby, and then when they start school in 5 years' time, an
mm,
incredible period of growth in just 5 years, perhaps the fastest of their lives. And what
mm,
did they do? Enjoyed themselves. That's all
mm,
they could, all they wanted
mm,
to do. Typically, not every child did, I know, but typically, that was and it goes right through till we got told to get a job, and then it all started, all starts to fall apart.
Mm,
But those first 10, 15 years, we are, but you're aging from the day you're born till the day you die.
mm.
It's a continuum from one part to the other.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The interesting thing as well is that we tend to separate the chapters of our lives in alignment with the cultural expectations that we have. So, like you said, like a lot of people, they reach the top of that bell curve, 55 plus, whatever it is, and they tell
Hmm.
themselves, oh, my best days are behind me now. Like those
Mm,
chapters are closed. It's all downhill from here, basically, and it's just going to get worse and worse. But actually, that only really happens if you think it. It becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. There's no
exactly.
reason, like as you've shown, I think you said you retired 20 years ago or something.
Mm.
Your life has actually probably, based on what you're saying, it's got better in many ways since you did retire, and it's because you didn't tell yourself that story that this is it, I'm done, it's over,
Mm.
off to the scrap heap with me. You actually reclaimed your life and started living it properly.
I can recall a day not long after I actually started a little consulting business before I left full time work, and just on a part time little thing that I was doing on the side. But eventually, I was out on my own, and I was living alone at the time. And I thought to myself one day, I could sit here all day, and no one would give a damn. No one to say, "Where's that report by 4 o'clock? Where do you know,
Yeah,
Peter? Can you do this?" Now I thought to myself, now I could sit here and do nothing, or I could get off my backside and get out and do, and I'm the only one who can do something about it. When
yeah,
you recognise you're the only one who can do something about it, that's when the magic starts to happen.
yeah. I 100% agree. Like it is that simple in a way. It's just about taking responsibility for our lives, knowing that we can make choices. Basically, a lot of people don't understand the power of choice, that they can even make a choice. Do you want to be in that wage cage, living a life that you don't like, doing a job that has no connection to your values and doesn't feel like there's any purpose behind it? Or do you step up and choose something based on what you learn about yourself when you're actually enjoying life, and you take the lessons there, or you extrapolate the lessons from that enjoyment and inject it into your life as a whole through purpose?
Yes, it's right. It's sort of there's a very fundamental question which most of us don't like asking. Why am I here?
Mm,
Why am I on this earth? Am I simply here to earn money and then go through this bell curve and that's it? Is that all what life's all meant to be all about? Is that
yeah.
how the world progresses? And
Mm,
we just leave it to people
mm,
who know better than us to do
mm,
something, and we just follow the mob?
yeah.
Or I do have. It's more than a choice. I actually have a whole stack of abilities that nobody else has. That's what
Mm,
makes me different, and I want to put those to use, even if it's only for my own enjoyment, which it might be after you leave full time work. I
mm,
say you do find a purpose either for pay or for passion, and after you leave work, you don't necessarily. And I know money after you leave work is an issue too. Money still is an issue, and unfortunately always will be. I'm afraid
mm,
the way the world goes. But it is certainly in the workforce. It's dropping in the point of priorities. People are looking for enjoyment. They're looking for work-life balance. They're looking for flexibility. All these issues are now surfacing, and money is important, but it's not the thing these days. I think
mm,
that's where the big changes are occurring.
mm. People are waking up to the unreality of the economic and workplace system, I think. Um, we've been talking for a long time. Like I've just realized nearly an hour's gone, so we
Yep.
should probably wrap up. But if you, just final question, if you were in your 30s or 40s now,
Mhm.
what would you do? Like what advice would you have for somebody that's, in that age demographic, and maybe they're kind of waking up to the choice of going on their own path, but they're not quite sure. What advice would you give them?
Um, I'll try and sort of just encase that in some of the stuff we were saying earlier to sort of re-emphasise it. If you're around about your 30 mark, your youth is still reasonably fresh in your mind about what you used to like doing. And perhaps if you are finding that in fact you are now living according to other people's expectations, you're probably at that age you've got a young family,
mm,
etc. I think one thing, if you've got a young family, you've got a duty, I think, to actually encourage them to
mm,
start thinking more freely about their future,
mm,
because then you can actually find yourself growing yourself and feeling younger again with the kids. So if you're a
mm,
parent,
mm,
definitely don't tell the kids, and it's tempting to do because you can only see the world the way you have, and you think,
mm,
oh well, but there are jobs being created now that we've never heard of.
mm,
Teachers are teaching kids for jobs that don't yet exist. Now,
mm,
your children, if you're at that age, your children are going through an education program that doesn't that allows them to do that. Now,
mm,
but as far as their own life is concerned, I find that when you hit 30, when you hit 40, when you hit 50, the big
mm,
O's all seem to have an effect on people saying, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life?
mm, mm,
And it happens for various reasons. That's when you start doing the look back to look ahead and start to peel the onion about what you've really enjoyed in your past. And
mm,
if you're 30 or 40, there's a fair bit to think about. You've had plenty of good, rich experiences that are still pretty fresh in your mind.
mm,
It takes a bit more effort when you're 50 or 60, but and I have a program which actually draws that out. But I would say at 30 or 40, life does begin at 40.
mm,
Life begins at 30, life begins at 40, life begins at 50. It's
mm.
always evolving.
Wow.
Stay positive. Stay thinking positive about what are you good at. There's a
Mm,
need for that somewhere in some way. If you
wow.
can, actually, let me word it another way just to wrap up. Tweak your skills to take you in a slightly different direction to what you're going now. Don't feel I've got to find a whole new life which start all over again. What am
Mm,
I good at? What can I do can I tweak my skills? For instance, with my recreation planning years, I tweaked my skills into becoming an enjoyment mentor. It's
mm,
simply I
mm.
continued doing what I love doing in my working life, and I
Wow.
turned it to a different cause in after I left work. Now, I
Mm,
think if you can look at what are you, and by the time you're 30 or 40, you've got a fair idea of what you're good at.
mm,
Think about how
mm.
can I adapt that to another cause.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. It's just about seeing things slightly differently and then
Yep.
acting in a slightly different way and putting yourself on a path that will be a lot different in the long run if you stay on it because you'll get different results. Things build on themselves. And just by making that little tweak, like you said, that little shift, it'll make a big difference to your life. And
And also
hopefully,
that
sorry.
that little shift is towards what would I really enjoy helping.
Mm, mm, mm,
What sort of community would I like to help with my sort of skills? So
mm,
you're actually looking at just not your skills, but whatever that new path might be that you would enjoy being on.
mm.
Then because you're now in charge of your own life. Your
Yeah.
parents and your teachers aren't in control of you anymore. You're making your own decisions.
There we go. Viva la revolution. Um, Peter, thank you so much for this whole conversation. I think it's been really inspiring, and I just love the way that you come across and everything like that. Can you tell people where they can find you online if they want to
Yep.
get in touch or anything like that?
I've dropped my business title, but my website still has it. I was called Australia's People Gardener,
Oh yeah,
People Gardener, growing better people. And my website is Australia's People Gardener, one word, .com.au. There's an AU on the end because it's in Australia. Uh,
yep,
so that's where you'll find a fair bit of my stuff. If you're on LinkedIn, look up Peter Nicholls, Lifestyle Mentor, Adelaide, Australia, and
yep.
you'll find my LinkedIn profile. And I think those two are the ones that you'll find the most of the information. And my email address is on there, peter@apg.life, which is an unusual one, but I had that. The old Australia's People Gardener address got corrupted. I think the Russians got it or something at one stage.
It's
And
typical
I
Russians.
got the new one, yeah. And the APG, of course, is the letters of the short for Australia's People Gardener. So peter at
Right,
apg.life, life. No
brilliant.
com, no AU.
All
So
right, well,
now all of those.
I'll share all that stuff in the show notes anyway, so
Good.
people will hopefully track you down. But Peter, thank you so much. Honestly, this has been really good.
And
And
thank.
sorry,
Go.
yeah, I'm just going to say, yeah, really good. And I hope I talk to you again sometime in the future. I've learned a lot, and it's just really good to see that even though we are different ages, reality is reality, and human nature is human nature. And if you can tune into that, then probably things will be okay.
I think I've loved it, Ollie, because of the difference in our ages. I just want to really help your age generation a lot more, a bit with my experience, etc. Because we do have you're quite right. We've all got the one life. It's just we've been brought up differently about it. Look, I loved every minute, Ollie. Thank you very much, and I do look forward to doing something with you again.
Peter, thanks again. Thank you so much.
Okay.